Reading this week's parsha, Mikeitz, just the backdrop on this. Yosef was accused by his mistress, the wife of his master, that he attempted to rape her. But of course it was a false accusation. He was put into prison for 10 years. The last year that he was in prison, Hashem orchestrates a situation where the wine steward and the baker are imprisoned. The wine steward, as it says in the Midrash, Parav had found a fly in his cup of wine. He was incarcerated. The baker, he had found either a stone or a piece of splinter in the bread. They had dreams, and as a result of these dreams, they were in a melancholy state. They were worried. Yosef sees them in this depressed state, and he says, what exactly is the problem? So he said, we had a dream. We don't know the significance of the dream. So Yosef says, why don't you tell it to me? Maybe I'll be able to interpret it. God interprets dreams, and they shared it, and he interpreted it. The Saramashkim, the wine steward, will be reinstated 3 days later based on the dream, and the baker will be hanged in 3 days. And that's exactly what happened. But as he interpreted the dream of the wine steward, he had asked him a question. He says, I'm an innocent man, and so on and so forth. I was sold into slavery, and I was accused unfairly, and I'm innocent. Please mention me, remember me, and mention me to Paro, and share with him all this information. And he says, I did you this favor by interpreting your dream. I'm giving you an understanding of what's going to be, that can be reinstated to your post. Remember me and mention me. Because he said those 2 words, each word, he spent another 2 years in prison. He spent altogether 12 years in prison. Yosef, when the 2 years, additional years were up, when it came to the end of those 2 years, not a second later, what happens? Paro begins dreaming. And he's standing by the Nile, by the tributaries. The Nile was referred to as Yor. It's the river with tributaries. Because it doesn't rain, so whenever the Nile rises, high tide, the farmers would dig tributaries, irrigation ditches into the fields, and as the tide would rise, the Nile would flood these ditches, these irrigation ditches, and that's how they would irrigate the fields. Exactly 2 years, because again, once he pays for his sin, the 2 years, he immediately has to be released. And how does he rise to power? Again, through interpretation of dreams. And here the Saramashkim, the wine steward, shares with him that there was somebody in prison who interpreted his dream, and maybe he has the ability to interpret Paro's dream. This is the background of what's taking place right now. We'd once mentioned him in Moral of Prague that the Torah goes to depict and define Moshe's physical state before he passes away. What was his physical state? Moshe passed away on the day that he was born, 120 years. He lived a full 120 years. There was his lo nos lecho, his vibrancy. Even at 120 years, he was like a young man, fully vibrant. Lo kosa eno, his eyesight was perfect, like a young person. And Rashi cites the Midrash, Chazal, afilu b'kever, even the grave. So Moral Prague asks, why is it important for us to know Moshe's physical state? His spiritual state, that he was Onav B'Kol that he was the most humble person we understand. That he was Neman B'Chol Beiso, that he was the most faithful human being ever to be dedicated to God, that's important for us to know. But why is it important for us to know his physical state? That he didn't age. He had the vibrancy and the youth of a young person. So he explains that anything within the physical realm is affected. Environment affects. There's cause and effect. People are affected by the environment. As a result of that, there is a consequence. There is an effect. But when are you affected by your environment? If you're affected by your environment, there's an effect. What about if a person lives in an environment and the environment is totally irrelevant to him? You live as an unaffected person. So he explains the concept of cause and effect, or be effective, is a physical concept. In the spiritual realm, once something exists, it exists eternally. It remains unaffected. So if a person lives his life as an unaffected person, not allows himself to be influenced, that person assumes a spiritual profile. That is the spiritual characteristic. Moshe Rabbeinu, since every aspect, every moment of his life, in the physical sense, in the emotional sense, in the intellectual sense, was always dedicated to God to the fullest, he was never affected by anything that exists within the physical. Ever. If that's the case, he remains an unaffected person. Therefore, the whole concept of aging has no relevance to Moshe. He's vibrant. His eyesight is the eyesight of a young person, so on and so forth. That's what the Torah is telling us, is describing his physical state to tell us, even as a physical being, he did not live as a physical being, he lived as an unaffected being. It once said that there's a story, which we once mentioned, told over, that Rabbi Yonasan Eibshitz, when he was a little boy, he was world-renowned prodigy. And it was the end of the 17th century, the church was always looking for prodigies to groom them, to mentor them for the church. So the bishop of the town where Rabbi Yonasan Eibshitz's father was the rabbi, he heard that he has the son who's a world prodigy. And at the age of 5, he already had the Tanakh committed to memory, he had Mishnayos committed to memory, had many things committed to memory. And so he sends a message to Rabbi Yonasan Eibshitz's father, and he says to him, you should drop your son off at my palace. At a certain hour, I'd like to spend a few hours talking to him. Rabbi Yonasan Eibshitz's father understands what he wants to do, take advantage of this little child, this old bishop, and he wasn't worried because he had felt that Rabbi Yonasan Eibshitz, even as a 5-year-old boy, could hold his own. So he drops him off, and he sits down with him. He says, young little boy, you're very bright, you're brilliant, you have a phenomenal mind, one of a kind, and he praises him. He says, I understand you have the 5 books of Moses committed to memory. So he says, even more than that. So he says, are you aware, it says in the book of Exodus, he gives him the chapter, verse, it says that you must follow majority. That's what he says to him. He says, is the majority of the world Christians or Jews? It's Christians, not Jews. He says, of course, he said, are you dedicated to all the precepts and principles that are written in that book? He says, definitely. He says, if so, it says you must follow majorities. If the majority of the world of Europe are Christians and minor Jews, you must convert to Christianity. This is what this bishop says to this little child, tried to take advantage of it. He says, I agree with you. The Torah says you must follow the majority. When? That if you have an irresolvable question, which is a doubt, you follow majority rule. Majority opinion. He says, I have no question. There's only one God, the Jewish God. Therefore, I'm consistent with every word that's written in my Bible. That was his response. Now, the Jews in the spectrum of existence, you have over 8.5 billion people. The Jews are barely a speck on the scene. 13 million Jews. The beliefs of the world are not the beliefs of the Jew. How is the Jew not affected and just totally subsumed and drawn into whatever these depraved and corrupt, warped beliefs of the world is? Paganism, Christianity. How? That is a confirmation that the core of the Jew is spiritual. In regard to our belief, we remain an unaffected person, people. remaining unaffected is a demonstration and a declaration that the essence of the Jew is spiritual and not physical. Our physicality is only a context of our situation. But what is our reality? Our reality is we're spiritual. And therefore the Jew, we're not saying the Jew is not affected to some degree, but in terms of the statistic, how many Jews, God forbid, should convert out of the religion, you can count them on one hand, at most. So that the core of the Jew is spiritual and not physical. But to whatever degree we are affected, that's how it impacts on us. So now, Yosef's brothers believed that all the tale-bearing to the father was to discredit them, disenfranchise them, that Yaakov should be so upset that he should curse them, and they would die. And because Yosef wanted that the Klal Yisrael should come from him. But the difficulty is, how could he even consider such a thing? There was a Masorah, there was a tradition that Klal Yisrael was going to be 12. Yosef's only one person. Yaakov is meant to father the 12 tribes. So how could they even if that may be his intent, Yaakov is not going to disenfranchise his children. He will not curse them. He will take what Yosef says with a grain of salt. But they somehow believed that was the intent of Yosef. But it was impossible, because Yaakov would never do it, because Yaakov had a tradition, as we mentioned, that the Chazal tell us that he took 12 stones in Har Moriah, and when they were fused to 12 into one, he realized that he's going to be the father of the Klal Yisrael. So if that's the case, how could he even suspect Yosef that was his intention? What he did may have been wrong. It was tale-bearing. But his intent was to destroy them. How could they even consider it? We find that the only two grandchildren of Yosef who were the equivalent of tribes, his own children, were the children of Yosef. Ephraim, Menashe, Kru, Shimon, and Levi. It's unheard of. How are grandchildren equivalent of Yaakov's own children? So evidently that displays Yosef not to being independent of his father, but he's an extension of his father. Therefore, Yosef's children could be the equivalent of Shvatim, of tribes. Chazal tell us, the Gemara tells us, that Yosef initially was supposed to have 12 tribes. Father, 12 sons, and each son would have been a tribe. Except when he was nearly seduced by the wife of Potiphar, he became aroused and lost 10 droplets of semen. For each droplet of semen that he lost a tribe. So therefore he only had 2 rather than 12. So when Yosef's brothers, who were something which are unfathomable in terms of the dimension of greatness, when they sensed Yosef, what did they sense in Yosef? He's the equivalent of Klal Yisrael. He's 12. How will it manifest itself? That they don't know. But in terms of what's his presence, Yosef is an extension of his father. As Ephraim and Menashe were going to be tribes, this is losing the 10 droplets. He's 12. So he's 12, there will be 12 tribes. And if Yosef is an extension of his father, if we become discredited and cursed and disenfranchised, therefore we will die. Therefore they judge Yosef as what? As a pursuer, that he wants to kill them. Therefore that was the justification to put him in the pit and sell him into slavery, for that reason. So now the question is, he spent 10 years in prison because he lost 10 drops of semen. So to what degree was he affected by this woman who tried to seduce him? He was affected to where he lost 10 droplets of semen. So for each droplet of semen being affected, that means, what was he? He was a physical being. He was physical. Being physical automatically means you're affected. You're affected, or you're in prison. To what degree were you affected? 10. He spends the full 10 years in prison. Now he interprets the dream of the wine steward. And he says 2 words. To what degree was your faith impaired? 2 words. Remember me and mention me. If that's the case, you were affected by your situation. 2 words worth. Another 2 years. 12 years. Where does the Maral say this? The Maral says this in the Dvor Hashem. The Torah tells us that we were in slavery. Moshe comes, he performs the miracles to prove that he is God's agent, to be the Goel, to be the Redeemer. And the Torah says, Vayamin ha'om, the people believed. So the Midrash says, it says to be believed, Miyad poskashivu. The bondage at that moment ceased to be. Why? Because they believed he was dreaming. Why is that a basis for the bondage to cease at that moment? So Maral Prague explains, what's the concept of slavery? There is no person more affected in his existence than a slave. A slave is the shadow of the master. Every movement, every behavior, the mere existence of the slave is dictated by the master. This is the most extreme level of being affected. What's Vayamein? Living in a pagan society, living in a state where you're totally incarcerated beyond anybody's imagination what slavery means, what bondage means. And despite that, they said, we're out of here. We believe he is the Redeemer. Would you say, something? It's not reality, but they believed. So what they believed was they did not allow them to be affected by their environment or the state. If that's the case, they can no longer be slaves. Because slave means you're dominated, you're affected. That's what Maral says, this principle. Therefore, it says, by Yamin Om, when they believed that Moshe was the Redeemer, immediately the bondage ceased at that moment, for that reason. So Yosef had to spend 12 years in prison because he allowed himself to be affected to that degree. But once the 12 is up, he can no longer be affected. He cannot be imprisoned anymore. Immediately. It's a beautiful word from the Meshech Chochmah, Meir Simcha Dvinsk. He was the valet of the wine steward and the baker for a year. They were ministers in the government. Paro. Do you know what it means to serve them hand and foot for a year? So all the protocols of diplomacy and interacting with them, understanding their mindset, what their behavior is, he actually went to diplomat school for a year. And Yosef, being a quick learner, being a genius beyond anything we can imagine what genius is, he learned everything. So when he came out of prison, he was cultured, and he was refined and mentored. He could be the viceroy. And immediately, he enters into that position to be his viceroy. So that they were incarcerated, and he was chosen to be their valet, to attend to all their needs, that itself turned out to be a bracha. That was a blessing to him, that immediately he should assume the position that he was given, that responsibility. Mentioned that Yosef was special to his father because he was the one to guarantee the survival of the Jewish people in Egypt for 210 years. He would set things in place, provide the material, the location, everything, and that will set the direction that after 210 years we will be able to leave Egypt. Because he was the viceroy, he was the master. He dominated, he dictated every aspect of life in Egypt. And this was his family. And all that Yaakov had learned in Shem Ve'ever regarding the Torah that's needed, how to contend with all the issues and all the impurities of Egypt or Chutz La'aretz, that was communicated to Yosef. Now, for him to be fully effective in that role, what does he have to be? He has to be totally committed, selflessly committed, heart and soul, a level of what? Of dedication, understanding what it means that any degree of hesitation or not be fully giving will manifest itself in how Klal Yisrael is going to look after 210 Gemara tells us that Noah, when he was in the ark, the Teva, he would feed the species every day. You know how many species there were. That after a year, he was spitting blood from a level of being overworked to that degree. And the Gemara says, according to one opinion, it says that he was maimed by the lion. That because he came late, he fed the lion late, the lion mauled him, and he became lame, and he was no longer qualified. He couldn't officiate, bring a korban any longer. He became what we call like the balmum. He actually. So, but the question is, Noah is tzaddik v'dorosav, dedicated. Why does he deserve to be punished? Why did Hashem allow the lion to bring upon this level of injury on Noah? So the way it's explained is, of every species, non-kosher species, it was a male and a female. What would be, as a result of his delaying, coming and feeding them, the animal would die. It comes out, you tamper with God's creation. You know what you deserve for tampering with God's creation? He had no right to be late. Because being late means that ultimately, after they come out of the ark, there's going to be a species that's not going to continue. But God says every species has to continue. Every non-kosher species, if there's no male, the female means nothing. Just a question of time before that's the representation of the species is gone. It becomes extinct. Therefore, that's why he deserved that level of punishment. That's what it was. If Yosef himself would not be fully invested and dedicated, selflessly, continuously, the shortcoming of that, the way it would manifest itself in the dimension of outcome would be catastrophic. So Yosef had to be fully invested, fully selflessly giving to his brothers, to his family. Now the question is, later we read when Yosef's brothers came to Egypt, and this viceroy, who they weren't aware that it was their brother, was giving them a very difficult time. Accused them of being spies, took a brother as a hostage into captivity to guarantee that the story is a true story. He played the charade, Yosef, and he gave him a very hard time. They said, maybe the reason why God is causing this to happen to us is because when our brother begged us not to be sold into slavery, we had no feeling, we had no compassion for him, and we were cruel. We were cruel-hearted. So you can imagine the trauma Yosef suffered at the hands of his brother, at the hands of his brothers. When they took him out of the pit, Yosef was the most beautiful human being who ever lived. They fetched only 20 coins for him. So the Midrash asks, he should have been worth a king's ransom, what he looked like. The answer is, as the Torah tells us, when he was in the pit, there were snakes and scorpions. He thought his life was over. When they took him out, he was more dead than alive. He was frightened to death. He looked like a corpse. So what does a corpse get? How much could a corpse fetch? So they paid 20 coins. Just to give you an indication to what degree he was pained and traumatized by his brothers. After being traumatized to such a degree, even if you want to forget, as you say, forget and forgive, you can't. You have the seared into your flesh, the pain, into your emotion, what your brothers, the way they abused you or mistreated you. How could you? Even if you're a tzaddik, you're still a human being. Did Yosef succeed? How did he succeed? We find the Torah tells us that Yosef was given a wife by Paro. Her name was Osnas, Bas Potiphera. Osnas, the daughter of Potiphera. And they had 2 children from her. Menashe was the elder, and Ephraim was the younger. Now, why did he name his eldest son, who was a Bechor, was the most special? Usually that's the most beloved to a parent, Menashe. So the Pasuk says, Vayikra Yosef Shem HaBechor Menashe. Ki, Nashani Elokim Eskol Amoli V'Eskol Beisovi. God caused me to forget all the angst, all the pain, all the suffering, all the trauma, and the household of my father. Meaning, Yosef experienced something that anything negative that his brother did to him, as if it never happened. Somehow, his emotion was cleansed. He was detoxified in terms of any negative experience. When that happened to him, he says, that was a confirmation. That was the message from Hashem. Now is time to begin. You are the true Mashbir, the provider for Klal Yisrael in Mitzrayim, to be that caretaker, to guarantee that we should not be diminished any more than we have to be. So when we leave after 210 years, we're ready to go to Sinai to become the Am Hashem. Therefore, otherwise, he loved his father. What kind of name is that? God caused me to forget all the angst, all the suffering of my father. And he didn't cause. What relevance does that have? A person has amnesia. It's a bracha. But here, this was the ultimate bracha. Because now he can be fully invested in what he was meant to be the shalit, to be the mashbir. That Egypt, he should use Egypt to be the location to set his father and his family in place, to be able to deal with all the future issues that are going to come about. Paro has a dream. What's interesting are people who have tough lives. Even a person is a maimin. You believe. You says gamzel tova. But how many times can you be beaten? How many times can you be disappointed? As a result of it, ultimately, there's some degree of bitterness. You're bitter. So you could be up, but there is, the old person has an expression, you know, he's always getting the short end of the stick. Always. Doesn't get a break. Sold into slavery. He goes into a pagan's household. Eventually he achieves stardom. He takes over the household. He's made a fortune for his master. All of a sudden now he's accused of trying to rape his master's wife, thrown into the prison. He's a prisoner. All of a sudden he finds favor in the warden's eyes. He becomes the equivalent of the warden. He's running the prison. Then he thinks he has his card, his ticket to freedom. A disappointment. Another 2 years in the clinker. Another 2 years in prison. He stays. Finally, he's being taken out. Now, where's he going with this? Is he going to soar and then nosedive? Or now it's straight up? He had no idea. Okay? What about a person who disappointed you? He could have helped you and he didn't help you. Especially when he owed it to you. When that person comes out, that person is going to really take revenge. And avenge that debt that should have been paid. Which he owed him the debt. Especially when he's a bad person. He's a heathen, that Egyptian. He's a bad person. He's an evil person. Paro has the dream. Nobody's able to interpret his dreams. So over here, the Chaim Kodesh says something interesting. It says, "Ein poser osam." No, they called all the wise men, all the magicians. Nobody's able to interpret his dreams. But Torah says, "Ein poser osam lefaro." They weren't satisfactory to Paro. It's simple. They said he's going to have 7 daughters. The 7 daughters are going to die, so on and so forth. He's going to conquer cities, 7 cities, then he's going to lose the cities. He knew that wasn't the interpretation. So Chaim HaKadosh explains, each king of Egypt had a name. Paro only means the king of Egypt was called Paro. All the kings were called pharaohs, but they had a personal name. He understood what he dreamt. He dreamt as the king of Egypt. The king of Egypt, the king when he dreams, and it's not on a personal level. It's what has relevance to his dominion, to his kingdom. They would tell him something that touched upon his person, on a personal level. He's going to have 10 daughters, they're going to be born, they're going to die, whatever. But everything they told him was on a personal level. So they imposed himself Pharaoh. He, as the Pharaoh, who was the king of Egypt, the head of the most advanced civilization, whatever they would tell him has no relevance to him in the state of Paro. In that position as Paro. Therefore he knew it has no, their dreams, their interpretation, regardless how great they are, they missed the point. When Yosef interpreted, this has to do with the kingdom. Does Egypt survive? Doesn't survive. Years of plenty, years of famine. What do you do with that plenty? And he advised them what to do. And therefore, because of that, he says he's the man. Have you ever seen a person with the Spirit of God who's so insightful? They were amazed. They were astounded. In one moment, he was able to give them the solution, how to guarantee the survival of Egypt. But again, it was Egypt. It was the country. It was his kingdom. It wasn't something on his personal level. So therefore, that was the Paro. So the Sarah Mashkin finally, so-called, pipes up. And he says, "Es chatoya ni masker yom." I admit my sins. This, whatever I did, I deserve to be in prison. And there was in prison with me somebody. And listen to the way he depicts him. The Shami Tono, and there with us in prison. Nar, fool. Ivri. He speaks a foreign language. He doesn't even speak our language. He's not. Eved, the Sarat Tabochi. He's a slave, a chattel, a lowly being, a subhuman being. Then Esapolo, we told him our dream. And he interpreted our dreams. Each person according to his dream, and it happened as he said it would happen. So Rashi explains, what are these three depictions? These three denigrating, derogatory depictions. Nar Shoter, he's an unstable person. Therefore, he doesn't deserve any position of distinction. Ivri, he's a Hebrew. Afilu Lushanein in the Makri. Can't even speak our language. Eved, he's a slave. Uksib with Lusi Mitzrayim, and it says in the protocols of Egypt, Shein Eved Molech, that a king, a slave, could never send to rulership. Lovish being they saw him, he's not able to wear a minister's attire. So he discredited him at every level to clip his wings, that he should not be able to go beyond that point. So what happens after he finishes interpreting the dreams? At best, they'll free him from prison. Or they'll just put him right back in the dungeon. So Rashi cites some measures times 4 more. Nar Eved Ivri. Arurim HaRishoim. Cursed are the evil. Shein Tovos and Shleimo. That even when they do good, they can't do good completely. Maskir B'Loshim Rizon. He mentions them in the most disgraceful way. Already saying what he did for you. Say it right. What are you mentioning it in such a disgraceful way? So even when they do something good, the good is lacking. Totally failing. If Arurim Yishom, the evil should be cursed. Seems to be difficult. Yosef's in prison. He's there 10 years. He wants to get out. He begged him, as I interpret your dreams, I did you a favor. Remember me and mention me to Paro. I'm an innocent man who was accused, and so on and so forth. I come from nobility. I come from a princely family. The Torah tells us he forgot about him as if he never existed. So that means Yosef was in the dungeon, suffered another 2 years. The Sarah Mashkim, the wine steward, was a minister. He understood Yosef's potential. He understood his ability. He was no fool. He knew what he was. But by depicting this way, Paro is not going to give him the time of day. That's what's going to happen. And therefore, he's not going to give him any special appointmentship. He's going right back in prison. He's not going to be empowered. What happens if he is empowered? Let's say he becomes viceroy. What happens to the value of Sarah Mashkim's life? Yosef is going to take a level of revenge. He's going to have him decapitated. He'll take him to the gallows. He'll torture him to death. So what should the Sarah Mashkim do? He's a bad person. But the depiction of an unstable person, a slave, a person doesn't speak our language. That was purely self-preservation. Because if in any way he depicts him in his true light, his life is over. So why is that Arurim Shoim, cursed of the evil, that even when they do good, they can't do it fully? The reason to do it fully, because he has to save his life. Because otherwise Yosef's going to take revenge if he's in a position of power. So what exactly is Chazal telling us? But from here they draw and extrapolate. Arurim Shoim, their Shoim should be cursed. Because Ein Tovos and Shlema, that Tova is not complete. The Sarah Mashkim spent a year with Yosef in prison. He saw it. If you have a person who's truly evil, who sees a person who's a true tzaddik, what's a tzaddik? He's humble. So Rasha, how does he process humility? He's a meek, weak-spined nobody, nothing. Because life is survival of the fittest. Everything is power. As they say, might is right. That's the way it works. It's a little man. Even when he could help himself, he doesn't. He could take advantage, he doesn't. So what is he? How does he see the tzaddik, the Russian? He's a worthless person. Incompetent. Irresponsible. What does he have to offer? So the way he's processing the tzaddik is within the context of a Russian. If Yosef spent another 2 years in prison, how did he process it? You know, he spent another 2 years because he had a lack of faith. For each word, another year, because that's the way he compromised on his bitocho, on his faith. It has nothing to do with the Sarah Mashkim. It has nothing to do with the wine steward. The failing is his failing. So if the Sarah Mashkim would have processed this, Yosef processed it. Does he have any reason to depict him in his most denigrating, deprecating state? No. So why did he? Because if he would have been in the place of Yosef, what would he have done to Yosef? That's exactly how he would have acted. He would have taken revenge. Arurim Mishoyim, cursed and evil. Even when they do good, they can't do it fully. You know why? Because they're all caught up with who they are. And the way they process things is within their own context. Why did it happen? Because he didn't do it for me. He should have done me the favor, he didn't. Maybe he didn't do you a favor because God didn't want the favor should be done to you. You have no right to say a word. That's the way you have to see it. But because he was a Rasha, that's Arur Misham, a Rasha, whatever he does, whatever he processes, it's within his own context. Therefore, he depicted him as Nar, Ivri, Eved. So it has nothing to do with self-preservation. But it's all a myth in his own mind. It's a falsehood. Here, there's a Seforno. Paro heard that this person in prison has the ability to interpret dreams. Torah says, "Vayiritzu min abor." They rushed him out of the pit, out of the dungeon. So Seforno says, "Kiderach kol tshuas Hashem," as whenever God's salvation comes about, shenasus kmo rega. It happens instantaneously. Instantaneously. And he gives examples. Ka'omro. There's a verse in Yeshayahu, Ki krovi Yeshua Siglovo. My salvation is about to happen. Ka'omro lo, Ami shomei ali, kimato ivei machli. In a moment, your enemies are going to be subdued. Kacho yi'in Mitzrayim, when we left Egypt. Ka'omro ki gorsh Mitzrayim. Ka'omro shlo hispik b'tzekot shel b'seinu lahachitz. They didn't have time to provide their provisions. The dough didn't become leavened. It was suddenly. Whenever the Yeshua comes, it comes suddenly. V'chein Omar Lasus Losid, at the end of time, when Mashiach will come, Ka'omro Upisam Yovo Lechotu Ofen, the Master will come instantaneously to the sanctuary. This is what happened by Ritzu, to go from the lowest of the low, to ascend to a level which is the most powerful man in the world, literally, within moments. And after the conversation, Paro said, he's the man. After Paro offers him the position to be viceroy, and he says, Ata ti al beisi, you'll be over my household. Apicha yishak kol ami. That means you'll sustain, you'll support all my people. Rakakisa eglu mineka. The only position I will be greater than you is I will sit on the throne. But in terms of every decision, you're the decision maker. You will dictate existence in Egypt. You must understand what I'm giving you. I'm placing you over all Egypt. Yosef Paro's tabato me'al. He took his ring off his hand. He gave this ring. That's an indication of power. Vayalbesh osa bigdei sheish. This was the attire. Garments made of silk, of linen. Yosef Revid Hazov al Torah. He wore a gold chain around his neck. So Rashi says, "Lesinas tabas hamelech." When the king gives you his ring, he owes lemishenoslo leo shening lo l'gdula, that he will be in second command right under the king. And his chariot was alongside the king, and they called him Avrech. Yom Paro Yosef. Again, Paro says to Yosef, I need Paro. I am the king. I am the monarch. I mean, he already said that before. Why is he reiterating it? So Rashi says, Shish biyodi ligzor zera al machusei vani gozer ani Paro aniya melech ubelodecha. He says, he's reiterating what he said before. What does he have to reiterate? Just remember, I'm king. Although you have all the power, I'm king. But you already said it. What does he have to repeat it? You think it was simple? Paro was no fool. Egypt, if the dream that he had is correct, unless he has a person like Paro overseeing, preserving the bounty of the years of bounty, and distributing it as it's meant to be distributed and sold during the years of famine, it will no longer be in Egypt. Egypt will perish in hunger. Will disappear. It will be a lost civilization. He has no choice. He needs Yosef. But having Yosef in power, understand, he could take over. He could become a shadow. Paro will go into the dustbins of history within a short period of time. Because who is the one making things happen? Yosef, completely. So he has to, again, because he doesn't realize Yosef is Yosef HaTzadik. Like the Sarah Mashkin. Russia, when he gets control, anybody who's not under his domination, he destroys him. Paro was worried. He will be destroyed as he would destroy anyone else. So he has to keep reiterating, I need Paro. I'm on the throne. You're second in command. But you already said it. Understanding, nobody understood the capability of Yosef more than Paro. Paro's no ordinary person. He's the king and monarch of the most advanced civilization. This is something out of the ordinary. So he understands what Yosef could be. So what does he do? What are the safety gauges, the safety measures he has to take? The guarantee that he will remain the monarch. You know, words mean nothing. You sign a contract. What does a contract mean? The other person could actually circumvent the contract, or you can't afford to go into a lawsuit. You lost. So what is Paro? Factually, the power's with Yosef. How does he go and guarantee that he will always be recognized as the king, and Paro is a genius. Paro. Paro called Yosef Sofnas Paneach. Vayitin lo es Osnas Paspotipara Kohen Isha. And he gives as a wife Osnas, the daughter of Potiphera, who was the original master of Yosef as a slave. And then Vayitzu Yosef, he says, now you have your papers to be second in command. And you will guarantee you're second in command. Now, look, it's an unusual name. Sofnas Paneach. The revealer of the hidden. People say, what kind of name is that? He wasn't known as Yosef, or whatever the Egyptian equivalent of Yosef was. The one who revealed the hidden. Now we got there. Paro had a dream, interpreted his dreams. Who is he? You know who his wife is? The daughter of his previous master. He's a lowly slave who rose to power. That will never ever be forgotten. So regardless of his capability, understand, he has him in check. He has Yosef in check. You're there because you interpret the king's dream. Well, who's the king? Paro. The one who's sitting in that back room, he's the one who's pulling the strings. He's the man who's really in power. You're there because he put you there. And if that's not enough, who's his wife? A man who comes from such special pedigree, does he marry the wife of a slave, of his master? People who will always connect the two. You married your master's daughter. And especially, according to Chazal, according to one Midrash, this was the child born to Dinah from Shechem. It was only an adopted daughter. Factually, he married his niece. That's who Osnas Bas Potiphera was. It was his niece. So it wasn't even his real daughter. She's not even a real Egyptian. But this was all the guarantee that Paro Raka Kisa Eglu, I will always be in power. He tied him into, he wrote a contract over here which will guarantee Paro will always be in control. He'll never be forgotten that he's the monarch. The Rechaim HaKadosh points out something very interesting. A person, let's say, 7 years of bounty. The level of bounty is 1 year could be the equivalent of 100 years. A person has such a reserve of grain. The second year is going to bother planting and plowing and planting and threshing and harvesting. Not going to waste his time. But factually, the reason why he won't waste his time is I have so much. But he doesn't understand the nature of the severity of that famine that's following, that's coming down the pike. If he would only understand, he needs a full 7 years of bounty to cover those 7 years of famine. But naturally, after 1 year, nobody's working the next year. Therefore, Yosef says to Paro, Yafkid Pekidim, you have to have overseers to force them. They must plow, they must plant, they must harvest. They must store it. They must. Because naturally they're not doing it. They're not doing it otherwise. Why? Person says, something, $1 billion in the bank, I don't need more than that. I'm going on vacation forever. He doesn't understand tomorrow they're devaluing the dollar, that it's worth nothing. See better. Or the man says, I have enough real estate, I can sell it, then they find out it's all contaminated property. That you can't get a dime, you can't sell it for a dime. That's how bad the famine's going to be. And it says that as soon as the famine began, Kasher Oma Yosef, as Yosef said. So what? As Yosef said, famine began. What does that say? The famine began, what do you mean, as Yosef said? When you have so much food, you don't even feel the famine. You don't feel it. No, it was Kasher Oma Yosef. You know what happened? There's a curse that you can eat and you never feel satisfied. That was part of the famine. Even though they had reserves, Kasher Oma Yosef, immediately as the famine began, they were no longer satisfied. That's what Torah says, Kasher Oma Yosef. That's how they knew that the famine started. Other person has. The world could be perishing, and you're living in your palace, and you're oblivious to the world. The world is irrelevant. What about if you're experiencing what the world experiences? Then you know what's going on in the world. So therefore, Torah goes out of its way. HaKadosh Baruch Hu made it. It was Kasherama Yosef. Yosef says the main moment those 7 years are up of bounty, there'll be 7 years of famine. Kasherama Yosef. If Yosef says there's famine, you're going to feel that famine, regardless of how much you have. To be continued.